I see your flowers here on the table. They look pretty nice. You know, just like as much as you can remember or whatever. And I have no idea, so I'm sure everybody else doesn't either, of who these people were or where they came from or whatever.
Katie never told her kids anything about her family because her daughter that went to China with her.
Who's Katie?
Huh?
Who's Katie?
My sister, the only other family member that's left.
Okay.
Besides you kids and your mom and Aunt Holly.
Well, I'm going to ask you questions that I'm going to know the answers to, but
some people might not.
Exactly.
Especially later on down the line, yeah.
Right. So that's why I kind of have to ask if I catch you just saying a name that you were saying about Katie.
Well, her youngest daughter, the one that she had a girl and a boy by the second marriage, and the girl, after she was married, she was 21, something like that. She wrote to me and wanted to know what her mother and dad's name were. She didn't know, and so I let her know, and then she said in the letter, Mother never told us what her name was before she married Daddy. And
you mean your mom?
No, Katie. She never told her children what my mother's, her mother and my mother's name was or Daddy's. The kids had no idea what their grandparents' names were.
Well, what was your mom's name?
My mom's name was Nanny Susan Martin Porter. Her maiden name was Martin, and then she married George Dixon Porter. So that was her name.
And where did they live when they met? Where did they live?
They lived in Oklahoma at the time. And Mother was born in Oklahoma before it became a state. It was called Indian Territory at the time. And my dad was born in Ruby, Texas.
Ruby, Texas?
Ruby, Texas. But Mother was born in Ruby, Oklahoma, and Dad was born in... Oh, I'll get them all mixed up and get one born in the wrong state here.
Yeah, that's all right.
Anyway, Daddy was born in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And Mother's mother, which is Grandma Martin, and she's Carrie Lou Hodge Martin.
Boy, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. And, well, all the women have to have a maiden name, so I was trying to bring that in, you know.
Okay.
And she was born in Madrid, well, they call it New Madrid, Missouri. It's spelled just like Madrid, but they call it Madrid, New Madrid, Missouri. And my mother's father was Benjamin Franklin Martin, and he was born...
That would be your mom's father. Oh, okay, I know what you're saying. Your mom's dad. Okay. Lost me there for a minute.
Well, it'd be my... Well, he was my grandfather. It'd be your mother's great-great-grandfather. George's great-great-great-grandfather. Kind of
And his name was what?
Benjamin Franklin Martin. I guess he is named after Ben Franklin, I
It
suppose.
must have been.
And he came from Indiana, but I can't remember the town in Indiana that he was from. But anyway, the state of Indiana. And he was born in 1853, Terre Haute, Indiana, I think she said. Grandma was born in November 1865,
That was Granny Martin.
Granny Martin. And on down the line.
And your mom?
My mom was born in November 19th, 1893. And my dad was born March 4th in 1893. They was born the same year, but he was born in March and she was born in November. Like Ollie and John. He was born in August and she was born in October the same year.
It makes it easy to get the birthdays over with.
Yeah.
So it sounds like all thems were Americans. All your relatives were Americans. None of them came over on a boat.
Well, I guess they're ancestors, because Granny Martin used to say that you kids are Scotch, Irish, Dutch, and Indian. Well, Dad was the Indian because he was half Cherokee.
The Benjamin Franklin guy?
No, my dad.
Oh.
George Dixon Porter. But what I think that Grandpa Martin, Benjamin Franklin, I think he was a Scotch Irishman. And Grandma said she had a strain of German.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just a little. But, you know, Susan is tracing the family tree,
Mm-hmm.
and because Dad was a Cherokee, she's checking the Indian books in Oklahoma, and she found Mother and Granny Martin both in the Choctaw Indian books, she says. That Mother always said Daddy was the Indian, she wasn't.
But she's in the book.
But
Not
Susan-
Cherokee, though.
Susan said she found them in the Choctaw Indian book, so she would have, like Grandma said about the German, she'd have a string of Choctaw in it.
But they can't find Grandpa because,
Well, they've got a record of George Porter, no middle name, but the book said he was born in 1906. But I think that's wrong. Well, I know that if it's him, that's wrong, because he was born in 1893, and I figure that's when he was registered, because the parents had to register him in the book for them to be
reservation.
Yeah, registered, whatever, Choctaw, Cherokee, Seminole, Creek,
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, when they started keeping track
That
of
was
them.
a high school chair when I was going to school in Oklahoma. It was a consolidated school, and from first grade through high school it was all on the same campus. Wasn't that many kids. It was a
Mhm.
Choctaw school, and that was the chair, you know, for the Eagletown High School. Choctaw, Cherokee, Seminole, Creek. Eagletown High School can't be beat, you know.
What was the name of the high school?
Eagletown.
Eagletown?
That was the town where Aunt Matt and Uncle John were born. We lived in Eagletown. Well, we didn't live in town, but that was the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go to the post office to get your mail, and there was no such thing as home delivery
Right.
at that time. Not there, anyway. But
So your great grandpa is the oldest living relative you can remember? The Benjamin Franklin, and
yeah.
Granny Porter or Granny Martin?
Yeah. Well, I knew Dad's dad. I knew him better than Mom's dad. But Dad's mother died when he was a little boy. And his dad lived with us on and off till he died when I was 11. And whatever Dad worked at, his dad worked with him. But they both were, well, they tried farming, and that they definitely weren't farmers. But their main thing was wood. They worked in logging or tie making. And at that time, they made ties with a broadaxe. And those guys were so good at it, you could rub your hand along the cross tie, you know, for railroad. You couldn't get a sticker in your hand. It was just like it'd been planed, and they did it with a broadaxe.
Jeez.
They were really artists at what they were doing. But but there wasn't no demand for ties. They had to do something else, so they tried farming, but like I said, they definitely weren't farmers.
That was in Oklahoma?
Yeah, that was in Oklahoma. And then when I guess I was 9 when they bought this farm where John was born. We'd moved from...
John, your brother?
Huh?
Your brother, John?
Yeah.
You were about nine?
Yeah, when they bought the farm.
Where was that?
That was in Eagletown, or, you know, out of Eagletown. The post
okay.
office was Eagletown, Oklahoma. And part of the farm was still in timber, you know, pine trees and oak trees and that sort of stuff, and they had to clear that while they worked their butts off and got the trees all down and digging up the stumps and all this bit, you know, a whole year's work trying to get the ground ready to put anything in it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was 20 acres that had been in cultivation, and they planted different stuff in that. I can't remember what all. They didn't plant any cotton. They had peanuts and other stuff. They had corn. And then while they leased another piece of property adjoining the one that they bought, and they put cotton on that. And Frank and I was chopping cotton the day John was born. Well, Daddy always delivered the babies himself, so he got us out, got us started on what he wanted done, and left us to do it while he went and delivered the baby. Well, about lunchtime he came back and he said, "You got a new baby brother." But Frank and I were delivered by a doctor, and he said there was no sense in calling a doctor, and all you got to do is cut that cord, take it out and wash it off.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he did it himself.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
There was 11 of us total. No, when Mother passed away in 1973, she had 9 living children at that time. And now there's 2 of us. Out of 11, there's 2 of us left, me and Kate.
In order from the oldest to the youngest, you name their names?
Yeah, I can name them. Frank George Porter, Mabel Lee Porter,
That's you.
Oradell Porter, Leola Porter, expired at 5 months, William Harold Porter, James Jackson Porter, Doxy Madeline DePorter, DePorter. I started to say DeBrock and I got D on it first. Anyway, she married a DeBrock finally. That was her 3rd husband. And then it was Delma Catherine Porter. That's Kate up in Humul.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nancy Carroll Porter. I started to say Slocum on her too.
What was Matt's name?
Doxie Mallon.
Doxie?
Doxie Mallon. D-O-X-I-E.
Okay.
They had a they had a real good friend, neighbor, and Doxie was the oldest daughter in that family when Matt was born. She was a grown-up lady, but the grandma Plunkett, she was a midwife when the father didn't know how to do the job. Well, when Leola, my little sister that died, Dad had, it was 1918, and the flu that killed thousands of people in the United States. It was quite an epidemic all over. And around their area, they told me, of course, I wasn't that old to remember any of this stuff, but there was mothers and fathers died and left little kids as the only ones there to do anything with them. And they were, well, Grandma Plunkett was one of the ones that, and my Grandma Martin, neither one of them ever got sick. They just kept working day and night with helping whoever they could, just going place to place. And they went to this one place because they knew the mother and father was both sick. And 6- and 7-year-old kids was dragging the bodies outside. They knew they had to be buried, and they just had dug a little trench, but not deep enough to really bury them. But
Right.
they dug a little trench, and they were, two of those little ones were dragging the body when Grandma Martin and Grandma Plunkett, because they called her Grandma because everybody my age or younger, they were grandmas, you know, a courtesy title, I guess. And then they took over and went ahead and got them ready and took them out to the cemetery, because they had a crew of fellows, volunteers, that just, when they got one grave dug, they just turned right around and dug another one, over and over and over and over. So, you know, I've heard the story of
The influenza
yeah,
thing.
that was 1918. But there were some families completely wiped out. There was no one left.
Jeez.
But the only thing I remember about that time is we got the new baby sister, and then I remember my Ben Franklin and Carrie took me in the wagon and went to the train station to pick up my Aunt Leslie. Aunt Leslie was Mother's brother's wife, but he didn't come for the funeral, but Leslie did, because Leslie and Nanny were good friends when they were teenagers and on through.
Your mom had how many brothers and sisters?
She had 2 brothers and 1 sister. Well, Grandma Martin was pregnant one time, but the baby didn't get born. And in those days, they didn't just go ahead and take it out. And that dead baby stayed in there till all the flesh went off of it, just went out. And she had a terrible infection, but they didn't do anything about it. But finally, the little bones, of course, they just
Finally passed
It
through.
wasn't a full-time baby, and they just finally passed out too. And she just had to doctor herself as best she could, just like with any other infection they had in those days. I don't know what they did use, but anyway.
So Granny Martin had how many kids?
Well, she had 2 living boys and 2 living girls.
What were their names?
Huh?
They'd be your aunts and uncles.
Yeah, they'd be my aunts and uncles. Yeah, my cousin Irene in Phoenix, she's the last of her family, and her mother was my mother's only sister.
What was her name?
Her name? Mary Molly Martin Cook.
And what was your mom's brothers' names?
Hello, honey.
Hi.
Come. The oldest son was James Debs, D-E-B-S. And the second son was John F., just a letter, no middle name, just John F. That's what my brother my brother was named for him.
And that was
And-
Granny Martin's kids, her
Yeah,
2
that-
boys.
Her youngest son. And then when Mother's youngest son was born, she named him John F. But my John F. went into the Navy, they said you've got to have a middle name, just like Warren, you know, our friend Warren,
Mm-hmm.
our hunting buddy. His name was Warren G. And the Navy wouldn't let him get by with just an initial. It had to be the full spelled out name. So he just made up a name that started with a G.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I still know myself as Warren G. Well, his birth certificate says Warren G. But the Navy said you had to have, well, just like when I went in the Air Force, I couldn't use my middle name. I had to use my maiden name as my middle name. So like on my driver's license now, it's Mabel Porter Steinoff.
Porter being your middle name, even though it's actually your last name.
Yeah,
What was your middle name?
Lee,
Lee?
just like your mother.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lady that worked in the polling booth that lived down the street here, and I went down to bowl down at the Anza Convalescent Hospital. It's something else now, but it was Anza at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I didn't know that your name was Mabel. And she'd known me about 4 or 5 years, and she didn't know my name was Mabel. Well, my team captain, I'd been bowling with her, goodness sakes, I think I was bowling with her at the time Nancy passed away, and that's 6 years ago. And when I got sick at Christmas times, not last Christmas, but the Christmas before, I wound up at Grossmont with pneumonia. And she come up to see me, and there wasn't no Joe Steinoff up there. And she said, well, her daughter told me that she was here because she saw her last night. And she said, well, we don't have a Joe Steinoff. And she said, we do have another Steinoff, but it's not Joe. And she said, well, just throw out the name. I'll see if it sounds familiar. So she told her, and she said, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
She came up and she said, I didn't know your name was Mabel.
I think what are the
I
odds
said-
of another
I
Steinoff being there?
I said, Joe fits on the computer better than Mabel on the recap sheets.
Mm-hmm.
But we had one lady, her name was so long that she just used her initials on the recap for bowling, and we called her Mrs. Coffee because of her initials was Mary Jane Blankenship, so MJB. So we called her Mrs. Coffee.
There's a Mr. Coffee, now there's a Mrs. Coffee.
Yeah, but that's what we called her at the, you know, when we was talking to her. Good morning, Mrs. Coffee, or whatever, you know, like that.
Mm-hmm. So after you guys ended up having the farm in Oklahoma, what else did you do after that? You stayed there for a while?
Well, we stayed there for a little while, and like I said, my dad wasn't a farmer, so he wasn't making much of a living, but he could make good whiskey. That was illegal, but he was making good whiskey.
Making money then.
And then the revenuers came. He and Frank was at the still, and Dad told Frank, hit the brush and run. Don't let them throw you in jail. So he was 15 at the time. So he ran, and he came home, Native Circle, and come around and came home. And we had Boo-Coo whiskey stored at the house and around the house.
How old were you then?
13. And he said, we got to get this whiskey out of the house, because we had, like in the bedroom, just quart jars of whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when those revenuers got there, my dress, the lids wasn't fastened down tight enough. My dress was wet all the way to the bottom with whiskey, because there was a wild plum thicket right across this 20-acre farm, and we was running with as many bottles as we could carry with the whiskey out there. Took them a little while to tear up the still and put out the fire and all that and get Dad down there. Well, Dad had got some 50-gallon barrels to store whiskey in, and then he put it into these fruit jars to sell it a jar at a time, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a quart of whiskey at a time that way. Because most people couldn't buy more than a quart at a time.
Right.
They couldn't afford to. And he had those kegs right out in the front yard where the wood yard was, where we had a fireplace and also a wood cook stove, a wood burning cook stove. Well, we had lived in the forest, the edge, you know, from the edge of our 20 acres, just pine trees and everything, you know, as far as you could see. So they just go out and cut dead trees and drag them up and cut them up out there. And he cut a couple of blocks about, oh, I don't know, 2 feet high probably. And then at the sawmill they had strips where they just cut the outside of the log off. People could have them for firewood. Now they use them nowadays, but they didn't then. They just throw them in a pile and you just go down and load up a wagon load of them and bring them back, cut them up into firewood. Well, he had one of those and he made like a bench with those kegs of whiskey underneath, you know, just this long board across them. And you'd go out there, shade of a big tree, and sit down, you know, just like a bench out there. It was just the board laying across that. So that while Daddy was coming in and getting cleaned up and getting clean clothes to go to jail, the revenuer sat on the benches made on 100 gallons of whiskey out there on those 50-gallon kegs of whiskey. They didn't have any idea. But you know, they never nosed around the house or anything to see it. Of course, they didn't go in the house. We didn't have to carry that whiskey all the way across that 20 acres and hide it out in the brush. But he had 100-gallon whiskey, that 100-gallon barrel that had a lid on it and a bung on the side. We could draw it out and put it in the jars. And it was down a ways, and we had quite a rainstorm, and it was on the you know, just like a rain barrel on the eaves where nobody had suspected there was anything wrong with this rain barrel, because a lot of people caught rainwater for one reason or another. Well, it caught rainwater, so we had bourbon and water, 100 gallons.
Diluted, huh?
No, it was kind of a different kind of thing. You know?
Watered down bourbon.
Yeah, so we had bourbon and water out there. And Dell used to comment, well, when she came for Mom and Dad Steinhoff's 50th anniversary, Lindy and Jack was drinking scotch, and we didn't have any other drinks except some wine. She didn't like that either. So Jack made her a drink of scotch and water, and she took a sip of it and hit her leg, and she said, "By damn, sis, that's just like that barrel that was sitting under the eave of the house. I can remember how drunk I got when she was, I guess when Dad had that, she was about 9, I guess, something like that. And, well, she just dipped her out a glass full of that and drank it. Put some sugar in it and drank it. Got drunker than a skunk.
Which sister was that?
Dell.
Oh.
The one that died last summer. But when I was 10, she's was a little over 2 years younger than myself, and we always had a garden. And Mama had to go to work, and I had to take care of Aunt Matt because she just had Matt. She was 2 months old when Mother went to work, and I had a garden. You know, I'd plant onion seeds, potato seeds. Well, what I'd do is peel the potatoes and plant the peelings, and the eyes on them would sprout and come up and make potatoes. And I had some nice green onions way up this big. And on a weekend, when Mother was home, and she said to Dell and I, well, we called her Mutt in those days. And Dad dubbed me Pat. So Pat and Mutt, we went out, picked some green onions for the lunchtime. And of course, we always had milk and buttermilk. And Dad had made some home brew, and it was still green. Not to get you drunk, but it wasn't ready to put in bottles yet. And so on the way back in from Dell broke off one of those green onion stems, you know, about this long, stuck her finger in the cap on the beer barrel. Because it just had this open-faced barrel with a cap, well, it's malt that's makes a cap on the top of the beer. I don't know if you ever saw homemade beer being made. But anyway, she stuck a hole in that, and stuck that onion blade down in through there, used it for a straw. She sucked enough of that green beer out, she got drunker than a skunk. You know, drinking that green beer. And Mother got lunch ready, and well, in that time you had dinner. You had dinner at noon, and supper at night. So we had breakfast, dinner, and supper. Dinner and supper. Well, we was having dinner. That was the middle of the day, and Matt was sitting right across from me. No, Matt is the one that. No, yeah, Dell was sitting right across from me, and I was feeding Matt beside me because she had too little to feed herself. Because I was full taking care of her. Everything was done for her, just like I was her mother.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why she depended on me so much when she was little, not always. But anyway, she got so drunk that she just got real happy, you know. So she took a sip of her buttermilk out through this same straw, fired back like that, and just sprayed buttermilk all over my face. Mother got her by the nape of the neck, and she said, "Go in there and lay down and sleep that off." She didn't even get to finish her dinner. Of course, it wasn't very long till she was asleep, because she was pretty loose.
Fast,
But
yeah.
that green beer will hit you pretty fast.
What was your mom working as?
Yeah, she was helping Dad in the field.
Oh.
And that's when they tried farming again.
Yeah.
He was working in the timber when Matt was born, and then in the spring when it was time to plant, when she was 2 months old, I was 10, so I was a good old lady. I could take care of a baby 24
better have
hours a
kids
day.
yourself at that age.
And I did the washing and milked the cows and churned the butter and cooked the meals.
Did
I
your
was a
share
big
of the
sis-
work.
I was big sister, so had washing to do on the rub board and all this stuff. Did pretty good, except bringing the sheets out and hanging them up and the bibbed overalls. They were so hard to do on the rub board, but I got it done. Got the stinks out at least. I don't know how clean they were. We had some good old times, and while we lived there, they had a cloudburst, that's what they called it, and it rained fish in our front yard. We had a crabgrass lawn, and it was thick as a hair on a dog. You couldn't get rid of the damn crabgrass, so you just mowed it down and
Mm-hmm.
tried to get along with it. You couldn't get rid of it, so get along with it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that grass was just flopping with fish after the big downpour of rain. And we went out there and caught fish of all kinds, from this big to, little ones like that, because the water had went through the Mountain Fork River and just swirled around and picked up and then went on, and it lost its grip and just dropped the fish in our yard. Grandpa said, manna from heaven. We didn't have whiskey in those barrels, but we had rain barrels, because the water was hard water. You had to put lye in it before you could wash the clothes and that sort of thing. It was real good for your hands too.
Mm.
But we had those rain barrels, and it would help to keep the white things white, and that if we boiled them in rainwater.
Yeah.
So we caught those fish and put them in the rain barrel, and some of those little boogers, they got up big enough. Well, I guess the ones that ate fish, we finally eat up all those fish, because sometimes there wasn't enough air in there, and they'd float to the top. Well, what they did was they got cleaned and ate no matter how big
Right
they were.
away, yeah.
But, it just died from suffocation, because there's too many fish for the amount of water and nothing to make it aerated like a fish tank.
Mm-hmm.
But where we were living, when Matt was born, Dad was working in the timber then, and he came home for lunch one day, and he was talking about the fish, and it was just a little creek he could just step across. Even at 10 years old, I could, just about, well, there was places at little pools that was too wide for me. He said there's a lot of fish in there, so I want to go back with him and go fishing, and he said, well, they're carp and they won't bite. And I said, well, I'll make them bite. I'll talk good to them, and I'll make them bite, and I'll catch them and fish. Well, I went down there, and oh my God, I got so excited. You could just see those little carp just swimming around in that clear water. The water was clear as it could be, clear as this water here. And I went back to the house and I told Mother, asked Mother if we had a fish hook, and she said no. She said, well, get me a safety pin. And all we had, well, in those days they wrapped your groceries and everything in paper and tied it with a string. Didn't have no tape or any bags to put it in and that sort of thing. So Mother always kept that string because there's always a need for a string. Now we just keep some rubber bands and put rubber bands on, but she kept the strings and had a ball of string. And I told her I wanted a string put on this safety pin. And so she gave me a pin. That was before Matt was born, in the fall before Matt was born. And I went back down where Dad was making the ties with my safety pin and my piece of twine string. I broke off a little limb off of a tree down there, a bush down there. I caught 4 of those boogers, but I went out and where they had the cows in the cow pen, and the grub worms, the little worms was shaped like that, and they're white and real puffy. And I dug them out of the cow pen, out of the manure, and the cow pen went down, and I caught 4 of those carp. They were goodly sized like that. Then he told me they wasn't fit to eat.
That's
but
true.
The boys ate it anyway. Well, I went ahead and cleaned them. It looked like good fish to me. I didn't eat fish, never have eaten fish. Well, not very much of it. I love to catch them, but I don't care about eating them. I just can't get a liking for them. When I was doing that halibut, I did eat a little of that. Maybe each time I did it, I'd eat a couple of those little chunks that well, I'd rather have a hamburger.
Sure.
And the salmon was even worse. Frank brought, well, he'd caught a 50-some pound salmon, and he just had a block cut out of the thick part of it, and he cut a block about this thick out and just, cut down through like that, froze it and brought it down. Well, he brought it for Nancy, and she thanked him and put it up in her freezer, and when Frank went on back to Alaska, she came over and she said, I brought you some fish from Alaska. And I said, what kind of fish? And she said, fresh salmon. Well, I'd never fixed fresh salmon, so had no idea how to fix it, but I fixed it like she said that she had had it before. Well, Lindy ate his, but he said I'd still rather have a hamburger than that. Well, I took a couple of bites because I'd never tried. I like canned salmon, and canned tuna, but I don't like fish. And she was talking about, Frances was talking about, her mother used to meet the boats when they come in down here to the pier and buy fresh salmon off the boat. And she was talking about how much they enjoyed that fresh salmon. So that was already cooked, and I just took my plate over to her and I said, you want some fresh salmon from Alaska? And she said, oh boy, do I. She said she ate every crumb of that and licked the plate. It was so good. But it wasn't good to me. I chewed a couple of bites and had trouble getting it swallowed. It's just not my cup of tea. But I'd love to catch fish, any kind of fish, didn't make a difference. Even the carps. I caught a big carp, 28 inches long down at the canal one time. But Grandpa filleted that, and I brought the meat to Mrs. Weston because she told me that her dad used to catch carp. He worked at the Roundhouse in Chicago, and on the way to work he'd put out a line. On the way home from work he'd take the fish off the line, and she said they would clean them and soak them overnight and then cook them the next day. And soak in they are bottom fish, and she said that gets that muddy taste out of them by soaking them overnight. And that 28 inch had made quite a good sized fillets when Grandpa filleted it out. And she really enjoyed that. I didn't try. Lindy said, I took a picture of it, and he said, might as well just throw it back. And I said, oh, come to think of it, Mrs. Weston eats that, but she eat any kind of fish. One time I got Grandpa off to work, and I done what I was going to do around here, which wasn't much. And I thought, well, I'll go down to Mission Gorge and go fishing. That's when I had my little Impala, where they had that road through there up over Cowles Mountain now. But they didn't have it then. You went around the gorge and go on into town. But I didn't have any bait. But I had some bacon in the refrigerator, so I got out the bacon and cut the fat off the backside of it and cut it in little sizes, you know, wrapped it in foil and went down there. And boy, they just, I got my stringer full, 2 fish on each little stringer thing. Well, I was still having fun fishing, so I just had that staked out in the river, and I looked in my little bag that Grandpa made for me to carry my extra hooks and bobbers and stuff. And there was a piece of sash cord about 3-4 feet long. I just tied a stick on the end of it, you know, a little piece of stick on the end so they couldn't slide on off. And I was just threading them onto that piece of cord. I had no idea how many fish, and I began to get hungry and want a cup of coffee, so I just saddled up and come on home. And I got out it's in the travel trailer, big old aluminum dishpan about that big, and I started counting the fish as I was taking them off this piece of rope and the stringer. I had 52 bluegill on the 2 stringers. So I went over, and she had told us before, I don't mind cleaning fish at all. If you've got more than you want to eat, just bring them to me. I love fish, and I'll clean them and eat them. Well, some of them I tore their mouth out, if they was too little, if I got them off real easy, you know, without tearing them up, I'd just throw them back, let them grow up a little bit. But I thought, well, I just bring them home, and I tell her she can dig them into the flower bed. It'd be good. I will not. There's a bite on either side, she said. She cleaned all those fish, and she put 3 in a package, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And till she was down to, I think she said, you better go fishing again. I've only got 9 fish left. She's eating them every meal. And the way she cleans bluegill, you know, get the scales off, she scalded them just like chickens. She put them in the sink and poured boiling water over them. She said the scales would just almost fall off that way. You'd have no trouble. I never tried it, but she said it worked. But anyway, that's the way she did it.
It worked.
I went down another time, and I was catching bluegill along, just dropping it over. I was sitting on a rock, standing there sitting on a rock, just dropping it down. I was catching there, and it got where I wasn't getting a bite. And the stream was going by, and I cast it out and let it just go down. Went down by some tulies, and just like that, something hit it. And I was catching little catfish. I caught 4 little catfish about that long. They were black on the back and real bright yellow on their bellies. Well, she said she liked any kind of fish, so okay, I kept them and brought them home. She said, I tried to put one of the bluegills she had caught, she had a 6-gallon paint bucket, I think it was, anyway, a bucket of some sort. She caught rainwater in it, and she was going to keep one of them for a pet, but it come belly up too pretty soon. And she said, well, Dad used to say you catch a catfish, it'd live in a horse track. I said, yeah, they'll survive better than any other fish, you know, out of water. So she was going to keep them, and then she got to thinking how good those tasted that she cooked. She wouldn't get killed him and eat him too.
So much for a pet. So when did you move from your farm in Oklahoma?
Well, after Daddy got in jail from that, Mother tried to keep things going till the potato crop matured, where we could dig out the potatoes, and we didn't even get enough money to pay for the potato seed, but anyway, it was a little bit of money. And then Aunt Molly's husband, George, come down and loaded us up in the wagon and took us 2 days and 1 night to get from Eagletown to Hartshorn. where Uncle George and Aunt Molly lived. They had a little bitty place, about 500 acres, with oil wells and all this stuff. And us poor peons, we didn't have a pot to piss in. But anyway, they took us up there until Daddy got out of jail. And Daddy had bought Dell and I both a riding horse. Well, I think what he did was traded whiskey for it, you know. And mine was gentle to begin with. They were young mares, never been rode. And mine, you could just put the saddle on and you know, just ride on off. Well, I wasn't very adventuresome anyway until Dad said, well, it's gentle, it won't buck or anything. So I rode it, and it was doing all right, you know, walking along pretty. I didn't kick it or anything to get it going fast. Well, Dell got on hers, a little bald-faced mare, bay with a white face. And boy, she didn't hit the saddle till she hit the air. And her cussing, the most cussing she ever done was, by damn. By damn, you're my horse and I'm going to ride you. And about 3 or 4 times in a row. And then she knew she had to hang on good if she's going to buy a damn ride. And she kept getting up and, boy, she was skinned on her elbows and her cheeks and whatever, however she hit the ground, you know. And get back on that horse and ride it again. Well, mine was just standing there looking while they were having their rodeo. Well, she finally got it quieted down, and then it started loping off. Well, mine started following after it. Well, the flies are pretty bad to bite them. And boy, that'll make the horses go fast when they get bit on their legs with it. Horse flies. I don't blame them, because I got bit with horse flies down to Colorado. But they took off running. Scared me to death. She wasn't scared. She was just having a ball, you know. But she's such a daredevil all her life. She tried everything. And she was hanging on and let that horse run. Well, hanging on was all I was doing. I wasn't having fun at all. Because I wouldn't have. Well, I fell off of Granny Red before that one. And we finally got them corralled and headed back toward the house. But I wasn't too happy with it. But then Daddy traded our horses for a T-model Ford sedan. And that's what we started to California in. Well, we didn't start to California. We're just going to go and find work someplace after he got out of jail. Well, we went to Post City, Texas, because he got out in the fall. Well, we found a little cotton picking that we could get, you know, picking cotton for cotton farmers until, well, the cotton was all mostly harvested, and there was a little, it was bowl stripping. Little bowl stripping is where the cotton bolls don't open all the way out, or you can just pull out and they just strip off the bolls. That's trashy cotton, you know, because of things from gets in the cotton. The peelings from the bolls gets in the cotton, makes the cotton kind of brown instead of fleecy white like white cloud. And we got a little of that. And of course, as small as I was still picking cotton and bowling cotton and whatever. Then we went on down, like I said, to Post City, Texas. That's before we got more up where it was warmer. And when we got to Post City, John was a baby in diapers. And it was so cold, I was washing his diapers inside the tent and wringing them and laying them in the dish pan. When I got out to the clothesline, Daddy strung a rope out for me to hang them up on, because babies, you got to wash diapers to get them hung up. And when I got out there, they were frozen so hard, I couldn't shake them out to hang them on the line. They were just, you know, where I'd wrung them out. They was just like a stick of wood. So I had to go back in, put them back in the rinse water, and then I just spread them over the top of the dish pan, open out. Then I just put these cardboard things on the clothesline.
Stiff on the line.
And I got the diapers all washed, and they'd freeze dry, and just a very short time out there, they'd just dry, flatten in the wind, you know. At first, they're just like a piece of cardboard like this, and within 15 minutes, those were soft, you know. and it just froze
Freeze the
dry.
water out of them.
It just froze the water out. Well, I got the diapers in and got them folded up, and when I was taking them off the line, oh, my hands were just aching. It was so cold out there. Didn't have any gloves. My ears hurt because it was cold wind. Way below zero, I expect. It was that cold. You could spit and it hit the ground in a ball of ice, like that. Just roll across the ground.
I say that's cold.
It had freeze going down. And Mother said we better start packing everything because Daddy said he's going where his weather fits his clothes. So we loaded up. We headed south Texas. And we traveled in that old T model for, I don't know. It was still real cold that night when we stopped. And let's see, I think we was 2 nights on the road, and then we got to Port Aransas, Texas, down on the Gulf Coast. Man, it was pretty nice down at the coast, even in the winter time. It's, down the south part of the Texas. And we had no idea what we was going to do down there. We were just going to try to find some work of some kind. And by that time, I was 13. Frank was 15. And yeah, that's just before I was 13, I guess. But anyway, we went down to the docks, and the shrimp boats was coming in. And they needed help taking the heads off the shrimp. The ship, just the tail part of them. Leave the tails on, pop the heads off. So I can't remember what we got paid. Not very much, but because we was kids, and you get kids to do things for very little money. Well, adults wasn't making much money either. But we both got a job doing shrimp. And Mother got typhoid fever. And she was pregnant with another time. And she couldn't stand the scent of us because we got the scent of the shrimp on our clothes. And we'd have to go to neighbors, take a bath, and change our clothes before she could stand us in the place. We was living in tents. And one day, Dell said, "Is it real hard to do that?" And I said, "No, it makes your thumbnails sore, but it's not hard to do." So she went down and they put her to work at it too. And up to the day she died, she'd never eat another shrimp. But I love shrimp. It didn't turn me off from it. And I even had some in my pocket and brought them home and cooked them. I could eat shrimp and not fish. So we did that for a while, and then the shrimping season was over. Well, what do we got to do now? Well, down south, it's like kind of like it is in Mexico in the wintertime, I guess, because they had the farmers had tomatoes, great big tomato plants and all that, but those big old worms with that knot on their point on their head, great big ones, big as my finger in that. So for $1 a day, Frank and I got a job with and our scissors. We were going around those tomato vines and cutting the worms in two, just letting them drop, just cut them in two and let them drop, get them off the tomatoes because, well, they were just ruining the tomatoes.
Right, they're huge.
Just nothing flat. They would trim the leaves all off and eat up the green tomatoes. So I guess it was worth that to the farmer to give us $1 a day. So we was getting about 10 cents an hour, I guess. We'd work about 10 hours. Our backs would get tired. Even little kids, their back gets tired stooping over, cutting worms all over, looking.
Underneath and everything.
And go back, go down this way looking, and then come back that row, and then take another row and go. So he'd have about 5 rows. I'd have about 5 rows, and then just back over forward like that, cutting worms all day long until the tomatoes got where they could harvest the tomatoes, because they, just as soon as they start turning pink, they start picking the tomatoes off and shipping them, because if you let them get ripe, they get rotten before you get to market. When they just started getting pink, some of them was just good size, but didn't even have any pink to them, but they'd take them anyway.
Still going.
we still traveling?
Yeah, I was just checking it to see if it was still going.
Well, let's see, from there we went to Agua Fria. No, we went to, where did we go? Yeah, Agua Fria, Arizona. We just kind of worked our way across the rest of Texas coming west. And can't recall getting any work coming through, you know, coming out of Texas. Got into New Mexico, and there was a little cotton picking in New Mexico where we came, and some apple picking, but they didn't want the kids in the apple orchard. I guess they ate too many apples or something anyway. But Mother and Dad picked some apples just for a little while, maybe a couple of weeks, something like that. Got a little bit of gasoline money. Of course, gasoline was about 10 cents a gallon back in those days. So it didn't take too much gasoline money to get moving. And we came to, in English, it's Coldwater, Arizona. But on the side going from here to Phoenix, you go by there, is Agua Fria. It's Coldwater in Spanish. That's what they call it. And it was a wide place in the road. I think there was a general store and a filling station at that time, it was 1929. And boy, it was like picking shit with the chickens around there as far as food. There just wasn't no work and no food and all that. Well, some fella had a cabbage patch, and he had harvested all he was going to sell. And he told Dad we could have all the cabbage we wanted, would cost anything. He said it's going to be plowed under when I get ready to replant in the spring. But he said I won't plow it under as long as there's any in there that you can use. I guess he knew that we were starving over there. So we had cabbage. Every way you could fix cabbage, we had cabbage. But anyway, then we heard the government was having a pink boll weevil cleanup in Gilbert, Arizona. And we had met a family. Their name was Wright. And they had a bunch of kids too. There was a girl 2 years older than I, well, the same age of Frank. And she and I got to be good friends. So we started out, and before we got to Gilbert, we ran out of gas and money. So she said, by that time I was 15 and she was 17, and she said, oh, I have been stranded by a boyfriend, no gas and all that. She said, come on, you and I can each one of us can get a can of gas. And our boyfriend has left us stranded out here. So we went, and she conned these guys into giving each one of us a gallon of gas in these gas cans that we had. Well, they were for coal oil for ladders, but we took the coal oil cans, get some gas, for her to con some gas. So then we got on down to where we could comfortably get on to where they was going to do the hiring. And we got up the next morning when the day that we heard that they was going to start hiring the people to do this pink boll weevil cleanup. And Mother had enough flour to make 3 pancakes. So the adults, and I was one of them, got no breakfast. Just the little kids got the pancakes. Nothing to go on it, just pancakes. And we go to get us a job, no breakfast, no prospects of lunch or dinner. But if we got a job, we'd get something to eat. So we went out, and the guy had a flatbed truck. He got up on the back of the truck because there's a lot of families out there with their kids looking for work, same like we were, old folks. And he got up on that truck and he made his little speech, and he said, boys or girls, if they're 16 or more, they can go to work, but they have to be 16 years old before they're hired. Well, I knew that let me out because I had just had my 15th birthday.
15, 16, what's the difference?
Yeah, well, anyway, 15 can work as hard as 16. But Blank, that Wright boy, he was 10 days younger than I was. Well, he was lined up with his folks, and Frank and Dad, and then Mother and I. So they told us the families to move up, move up, father and son, so forth, That's what he, when he's making his speech, what we're supposed to do. And of course, Mother knew what the man meant when he said it had to be 16. And when we came up, well, I knew I was out because I knew I just had my 15th birthday. So we got up there, and she gave him her name and age, and he said, "How about the girls? Is she old enough?" Mother said, "Yes, sir." Well, I was old enough, but I wasn't 16. She didn't say I was 16, so I was hired. Then Mr. Wright and Link came up, and he didn't look it, but I went to the market with Mother, and the man in the market said, "How old is your daughter, 12 or 20? He said, "I can't tell by looking at her whether she's 12 or 20. I was at that age that you couldn't tell how old I was." Well, I guess that government man couldn't tell either because he didn't question it one bit. He just signed me up, and I had a job. Well, my brother Jack always got all the childhood diseases because he was the middleman. There was 5 above and 5 below, and he was the middleman of the 11 kids. And he came down with the, first you had chicken pox. And then, it's when we was at this Agua Frio, that was before we went to Gilbert. I'm getting ahead of my story, because when we was at there where we eat the cabbage, they got smallpox. He brought that home from school. We got the smallpox, and me and the tiny baby was the only one, the one that was born in Texas. We were the only ones that didn't get the smallpox, and Dad had had the smallpox before, but he had a real bad time. They were even broke out in the palms of his hands and the bottom of his feet. He had such a bad, and in his eyes. And all of them were all the rest of the family except me and the baby was real sick with the smallpox, and she got pneumonia. Well, even with the smallpox, Mother got up and fixed they call it a pneumonia jacket, a thing with like Vicks or something on her, out of wool cloth and put on it. Well, she was still just squeezing and wouldn't eat and all this bit, and I was holding her. I'd been, setting up with the sick ones and the baby, with the smallpox ones and the baby. I had been up about 2 weeks with no laying down to go to sleep. I'd fall asleep holding the baby in my arms because she was so restless and that before she got that bad, because after a while she got so bad she just like, just before death. And so I was holding her in my arms and trying to soothe her. She went limp. And within 15 or 20 minutes after that baby died in my arms, all the cats in the whole neighborhood was squalling and scratching at the wall and everything, trying to they could smell or sense the death.
Huh.
So then all it was for me to do was just take this pneumonia jacket off and wash her up and put clean clothes on her, and the pillow that I would have slept on if I was able to sleep, my dad had made a little pool table for the kids, he just made a frame with a piece of a cotton sack, canvas cotton sack, and made the table, and made him a pool table, and he made the balls out, just whittled them out. They weren't all that round, but it's whittled out. At least they could play with them, There's something. Well, that's the only kind of toys we ever had was something Daddy made for us out of wood or something like that. Except one time when I was about 5 or 6, and whatever happened to my doll, I don't know. I think we left it in the trunk. When we left the trunk stored at my aunt's in Oklahoma, and we never did get it back. But anyway, I laid that pillow on that pool table and spread one of her little blankets over it and laid her on there and put a blanket over her. Well, I told Mother that she was gone and what she could do, and she said, Well, sister said, I can't, I'm just too sick, I can't do anything. So she had told me what I should be doing, so I went ahead and did it. But I had been up with them so long, when I didn't have to sit up with the baby, I couldn't go to sleep. Mother called a doctor and got a prescription for something, sleeping pills, I guess, put me to sleep. They had to wake me up then to take for the funeral. But one of the neighbors there is a bunch of tramps just like we were, but they had professions of kinds. And this one man made the most beautiful cedar coffin you ever wanted to look at. And the woman gave him her wedding dress, a white satin wedding dress, to line the coffin with. It was a beautiful little coffin.
Wow.
About that big. People helped each other when they could, you know, because there wasn't no way. Dad said he didn't have any idea how he was going to get a casket for that baby. But they were still scabby as all hell when they had the funeral for the baby. She's buried at Liberty, Arizona. And after years after we were in San Diego, Mother went back over, and she took a whole bunch of abalone shells and outlined her grave with abalone shells. Still couldn't afford a headstone or anything. And from time to time, Mother would go back to Oklahoma and visit her sister back there. And for a long time, her mother lived back there, and visit them. And then Granny came on out here. But she'd stop off, to see the grave and this sort of thing. And she'd find those abalone shells on every grave, and she had enough of them, that big box, and just completely outline that little grave. But people coming, those are pretty, so they'd take one off, put it on their grave or whatever. And Dell was married to a fellow named Horseman, and he was sent from Los Angeles to Phoenix to work for a year. Well, she and the kids moved over there too, so she went down to Liberty to check on Raina Evelyn's grave, and there was no shells left anymore. So she went and bought a headstone, and well, it was one of those cemeteries you couldn't have it up; it had to be a flat, like Glen Abbey, it had to be flat where they could mow over. So she went and had a marker put on it on the grave. So now we could find it if we went back and looked. But
how old was she when she died?
About 5 months old. Mother lost 2 babies, and they were about 5 months old, and both died with pneumonia. But
how many of you were in the car when you got to there?
Well, let's see. Well, I guess she was after John, so there was just Kate and John of the 11 Kate and Nancy of the 11 that hadn't been born at that
so
time.
So there was eight kids?
And of course they lost the one baby in Oklahoma when I was 4 years old, and that was another thing that told me how to, put a pillow down and put a blanket on to lay the baby out, because when the baby died when I was 4 years old, this Grandma Plunkett and my grandmother, they put a pillow on the sewing machine. You let the sewing machine sewing part down, and it was just a flat surface. Put a pillow on that and laid her on that and covered her up on that. Well, that's the way I did it on the pool table, because we didn't have the sewing machine. We'd left the sewing machine in Oklahoma. I had too many kids to bring much of anything. We had a trailer. By that time we had a trailer, because Dad had made one. Got an old wheels and axle, I guess, from an old car or something, and made a trailer on it. All the junk.
So there was about 8 kids, and then Ma and Pa in that Model T?
Yep.
That's a hell of a load.
Yep. But then, after we got over to Gilbert, was doing the thing over there, and we was doing pretty good. But that morning we went out with nothing to eat, no prospect of. Well, my brother Bill didn't make the mark either, so he was out there hoping to get a job because he'd been picking cotton and this sort of thing, but it wasn't for the government that he was working for. The government was strict. They wouldn't, as boys, they didn't look as old as I did, I guess. But they didn't get a job. So Bill told Link, well, Link, these people had no breakfast, and we got to go and find something for them to eat for lunch. If we have to steal it from the grocery store, he said, we're going to bring them something for lunch because they can't work with nothing to eat.
Mhm.
So they went into town, and their idea was get some junk and sell it to the junk man. Well, at first they asked him if he paid money for copper and whatever, you know. He did. So they were scattered around town, but there's somebody else that had the idea too, though they couldn't find anything. So they went back to the old man's lot, dug a hole under the back fence, stole a bunch of stuff and brought it around and sold it to him. And they went to the store and got some bologna and a loaf of bread and some cheese and bologna and a loaf of bread, 2 loaves of bread. And that's what we had, and we had water to drink it with for lunch. Well, the government furnished a keg of water. You'd go and they brought water out to the field in those kegs with your faucet on. And then we didn't know that Mr. Wright didn't own his T-model, but Dad said, well, I'm sure now that we've got a job, I can get some groceries. So he took the pink slip to from Oklahoma, it wasn't a pink slip, but a certificate of ownership, you know, same as a California pink slip. Took it down to the grocery store and told him that we had got a job working for the government, and he needed to get some food so we could work till we got a paycheck. And he said, I'll let you have my title to my car until I get paid, and I'll pay you for the groceries and get my title back. The fellow said, well, there's been people come in here and asking for credit, but they had nothing to back them up. But he said, yeah, I'll give you credit. And he said, there's 2 families of us, because he said to Mr. Wright, well, get your pink slip to your car, or your title to your car, and we'll go down to the grocery store and put them up for groceries and get some food for our families. He said, I don't have a title to my car. We never did find out if he stole it or just bought it and didn't finish paying it off or what, but he didn't have a title to his car. So Dad told the man at the grocery store, he said, there's 2 families of us, just 1 car. But he said, I've got to have to get enough groceries to feed 2 families. Man said, all right. He said, I've been given credit, and he said, I've lost money on some of them, but at least I could sell your car to get enough for 2 bills of groceries. So he got groceries enough to last us, both families, until, well, it wasn't high on the hog, pinto beans and potatoes and
stuff
flour
that goes
and
real
cornmeal.
far.
Yeah, something that go a long ways. And we'd have pancakes for breakfast, and Mother made sugar syrup. She'd put sugar in water and boil it until it pretty thin syrup, but anyway, it was beat having just
Plain pancake.
just a pancake with nothing on it. We couldn't afford eggs or bacon or anything until after we'd had 2 or 3 paychecks, but anyway, we did real good there, and we were doing fine until Jack brought smallpox home. He measles. Brought measles home.
Yeah, stop sending that kid to school.
He wound up real sick with measles. Well, yep, he had the measles. So, next thing you know, Dad came down with the measles. Wasn't able to go to work. On the high temperature. Next day, Mother had it. And going right down the line, plumb on down to me, nope, and I never got it. Well, your Grandpa Fempel's family was also